Hello? Hello? Am I audible? Yes. First of all, let me thank DBG for inviting me to this talk. And I also want to thank you all for taking time. You're all busy IT people. So thank you for taking time off from your busy schedule and being here. And we will try to make this time worthwhile. So we will talk about Node.js. I will try to show some sample snippets of code. I will also try to kind of interactively develop a small hello world Node.js application so that you get a concrete idea of what the whole technology is about. I'll also try to give you a conceptual understanding of some of the ideas behind the Node.js platform. First of all, a few slides about what I'm currently doing. Currently I'm just starting up a consultancy focused on security. That's called DependSoft Consulting. So actually you can http://dependsoft.com. So if you want to, I don't want to spend too much time on this. Sorry. Okay. So these are some of the actually DependSoft my work is it's a combination of consulting as well as some products which I'm currently working on. So I have some experience with programming languages and embedded systems also. So I'm actually currently developing typically the programming language used to develop embedded systems, especially the law in embedded systems is C, right? C is not type safe and memory safe. In fact, if you look at almost all the major security problems today, like buffer overflow, stack overflow, heap overflow, format string problems. So most of these issues can be traced back to lack of type safety and memory safety. So the attempt is to provide a type safe programming language for developing secure and safe embedded systems. It's an open source project. And it's called IntegralJ. So integralj.org, you can. And these are some of the products that I worked on. One is a virtual private transport. As Deepu kindly told at the beginning of the talk, I developed one of the earliest open source SSL VPNs. And that kind of gave me the understanding that the problems with VPNs. So VPT is an attempt to solve problems with traditional VPNs. So VPT basically does transport level connectivity, not network level connectivity. And actually, some of this recent works, actually the web service part I developed along with one of my students in Node.js. So that has given me kind of the practical idea of the Node.js platform. So these were some of the technologies that we used. Again, the VPT, the basic engine is open source. Okay, now let us move on to our talk. Now we all know, I'm sure everybody, all of us know about JavaScript, right? Nobody in IT field would not know about JavaScript. But it came as a surprise to most of us that JavaScript started to be used as a server-side language. So what is required for something to be used as a server-side language or server-side platform? So these are probably 5 important things that a server-side platform or a server-side language needs to support. One is it needs to be performant. You cannot have a slow language implementation as in the server side because you need to scale up. So performance is an important criterion. Concurrency. So the platform needs to support some concurrency model because you need to be able to serve n number of browser requests or n number of clients at the same time. So concurrency. Then you also need a good amount of, the language might be great, but if you don't have library support, it is useless because you don't want to be writing everything from scratch. So you need library support for things like database interfacing and so on. Then you also need, nowadays, few of us, especially in the web, world, would start programming from scratch. We typically rely on a framework to provide structure to our code that allows us to, make the code readable, maintainable, and it enables us to put some proper structure so that basic quality is ensured. So I have some framework support is required, server-side framework for rapid application development. Frameworks also improves productivity quite a bit. So there could be more, but these are some of the important points. Now let us see how Node.js answers these questions about performance, concurrency, and so on. Now Node.js is actually based on, or actually it uses Google's V8 virtual machine. And that actually performs JIT compilation of the JavaScript code into native code before actually execution. So that means it is not, we are not interpreting JavaScript used to be thought of as an interpreted language. So in V8 JavaScript is no longer interpreted. So that gives us adequate performance. Concurrency. So we'll actually see more about this. This is actually an important topic in Node.js. So in concurrency model behind Node.js is to rely on asynchronous I/O. So actually it uses a platform independent asynchronous I/O library called libuv. So we can think of core of Node.js as libuv plus V8. And then it also has the option of clustering. So we'll see more about that. So basically it has a proper concurrency model. Library support. Actually, I just did a search on Node.js in GitHub. And there are like 39,000 projects listed with the Node.js tag. So that means there is quite a good number of projects on Node.js. So there is good library support. Actually, great library support. And Node.js also features frameworks like Express, and there are a few others also, which allows us to rapidly develop and structure our server-side application properly. By the way, actually, maybe I should have asked you first. Deepu was actually saying that we should start the talk because you came for Node.js talk. You may have some questions about Node.js platform in your mind. So, yeah.
So it is just like that is before going into the session. That is once we complete the session, we may hesitate to ask questions. So right now we do not know anything about Node.js. So let's start with silly questions. So what is Node.js? How does it support? So what all are the questions that was in your mind when you came for attending a session on Node.js? How many of you had worked on Node.js? Is there anyone? Oh, Praveen was there, of course. Okay. So I hope that all the others have a lot of questions in mind. And why didn't we start working on Node.js yet? Because there was an entry barrier. That is, we fear that it is something, it is not something related to our technology. Or there is some reason for us for not starting with Node.js. Do you know what is that? So we can start asking some questions. So anybody? And let's see that whether we will be able to cover all those questions today or not. So we can understand the.
Yes, yes. So Node.js is relatively new, right?
Yes.
So there are still so many server-side languages.
Yes.
Okay, I understand Node.js is using the JavaScript semantics, but why a different server-side language when the others were really performing? What value add did Node.js bring on server-side, apart from that it was more of following the front-end JavaScript semantics?
Good question. Actually, if you don't know the answer, best way to answer a question is saying it's a good question. No, actually, I know the answer. Actually, I'll be answering this question throughout the presentation.
So if some question is not covered in this, he will give you answer right now, and if not, he will cover it in the session.
So this particular question I will be covering, and still if you have any lingering doubt in your mind, you can
no silly questions? The questions? So everybody is hesitating even to ask questions on Node.js. So you understand that is how dreadful it is. Okay. Oh.
Can we achieve the database access through the Node.js?
Pardon me?
Database access.
Okay.
How can we?
Yeah, actually I'll be covering that.
Because right now I'm using AngularJS with the Grails framework as a backend.
Okay.
I'm trying for that combination, and I'm looking for a Node.js for a server-side scripting.
Okay.
So any other question? Okay.
So actually, this was a good question. Let me attempt to answer this, in the following slides. So, okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so here actually I had, in the previous slide I had talked about asynchronous I/O. So what is asynchronous I/O versus synchronous I/O? It's a very simple but fundamental distinction. So in synchronous I/O, ultimately, if you want to do some computation, you have to have a thread allocated, right? So if you're executing your PHP or ASP or JSP or whatever kind of code in the backend or in the front end, there is a thread executing your code. So in synchronous I/O, the thread which is executing your code blocks. So when you initiate an I/O request, like for example a database query, or a file read, or a network read, or something, any kind of input-output operation, the thread executing your code blocks till the I/O request is complete. Now we may not think this is a big deal, but the thing is I/O requests are typically way slower than CPU execution speed. So that means there is a so that means the thread is kind of blocked. Of course, that doesn't mean the server stops entirely. The server comes to a standstill. Actually, what the server will do is server will schedule some other thread to execute. So, but in synchronous I/O, the thread blocks till I/O request is complete. For example, this is actually a PHP kind of a syntax. Result is equal to assigned MySQL underscore query. So what happens is, till the MySQL, the query is completed, the thread blocks. And once the query is completed, you get the result, right? We are used to this kind of programming, whether it is Java or any other language. But in asynchronous I/O, the thread does not block. So what happens? So we use a callback mechanism to notify completion. So if you have done front-end programming, you know about callbacks. Or if you have done any kind of UI programming, you know about callbacks. Callbacks are basically functions that we register with the framework. And the framework calls back the function when that event occurs. Like for example, a mouse click, or in this particular, the event is I/O completion. Like for example, the same synchronous I/O in a synchronous framework like Node.js, it would be connection.query, you give the query string. And then as another argument, you give a function, a callback function. And of course, in JavaScript, it so happens that JavaScript actually inherits, you may have heard about functional languages, right? So JavaScript inherits some ideas from functional languages. So in JavaScript, unlike in many other languages, function is a first-class object. So you can easily pass around functions and return functions, etc. So so that makes it very easy to program this kind of asynchronous I/O in JavaScript. So this is asynchronous or synchronous I/O, and Node.js uses asynchronous I/O rather than synchronous I/O. And in this, we talked about concurrency, right? So concurrency needs some kind of a threading model. So how do you allocate threads to different requests that are coming in, concurrent requests that are coming in? In typically, for example, if you run Tomcat or any usual backend server-side platform. Typically, there would be a pool of threads, and when a request comes, a thread is allocated from the pool to execute the request, and the thread remains allocated for that request till the request is completely completed, and then the response is sent back. Whereas in Node.js, there is a single computational thread that is responsible for executing all the requests. So all the concurrent requests are executed in a non-blocking interleaved manner. So basically, the first request comes, and we start request processing, and let us say the request initiates an IO. Now, so at that time the thread is not blocked. So at that time, what we will do is we will take the next request, we will start executing it. Now let us say that thread is blocked on same IO. So at that time we will take another request. So that single computational thread is never idle as long as there is a request waiting to be processed. So there is a single computational thread that executes all the requests, and there are background worker threads to do the IO processing. But okay, don't look at the second point. Let me ask you this question. So do you foresee any problem with this approach? So I have a single computational thread, and what I'm saying is, so instead of having separate threads for different requests, the same thread never sleeps, never blocks. So it takes one request after the other and processes the request. So whenever a request is waiting for an IO, it takes another request to be processed. So do you see a problem with this model?
Requests come simultaneously. What happens if two requests?
Then it has to be queued.
Then that means we will not have a concurrent operation. Like we'll have to wait for one thread to complete, means one operation to complete for doing another operation.
That is actually true even in a multi-threaded scenario. Let us say you are running in a multi-threaded model in a single CPU system. So in that case also the same issue arises, because ultimately one CPU can only execute one thread at a time. So when one thread is executing, all other threads are going to be waiting.
Whenever the callback is being callback,
yes.
So the new request will be blocked, right?
When the callback is executing.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that same, it is kind of the same question. So when a callback is executing, let's say new request comes. Yeah. So till the callback completes, the new request has to wait. But that is the same issue with even in a multi-threaded model with a single CPU.
Okay.
Because a single CPU can only execute one thread at a time. But here, if you want to kind of stretch it, you can say that in a multi-threaded scenario, there is actually some overhead associated with creation of thread and threads context switching. So all those kind of issues, problems are avoided here. Overheads are avoided here. And another kind of is actually one. Do you see an advantage with this? Do you see any disadvantage and do you see an advantage?
Maybe the second request needs the response for the first request. So we cannot handle that simultaneously.
What is it?
Maybe the second request required the response from the first request to process, maybe a parameter or something.
But each request is coming from the client, right?
Yes.
So those are independently processed.
Okay.
Each request is so you get a request. The request has some parameters, and the
yes.
server processes the request, sends a response back to the client.
Okay. The parameter of the second request depends the processing of the first request. At that time, it may be depend.
No, that because the server, that kind of dependency, I'm not sure I get
maybe
the question.
For example, updating a database query or something like that.
Okay.
And you need a ID from the first request that is processed.
No. Then actually your code is actually buggy, because if you are actually expecting, because if you are sending two different requests,
yeah,
and you want the second request to be processed after the first request,
Then
and you're depending the thread scheduling or whatever to schedule your request in a certain manner, then that is not a
we should handle it in single request.
Yeah. So or your client side code should wait for the first request to complete till before the second request is dispatched.
Okay.
Or in a single request it can be done.
Yeah. And then there is no benefit of using
Exactly.
Node.js for that purpose.
Yeah. Session, it is the same. Cookie and HTTP cookie based. I mean, there is no.
Can we handle priority wise this thread?
Priority based
If
request.
the second thread having more priority than first one.
No, there is only one thread here.
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying.
Yeah, I'm saying
priority based.
Yeah.
But the thing is, typically in a web application, when we talk about multi-threaded model in a web application, all the threads will run with the same priority, because the thread, the thread cannot really distinguish between which is a high priority request and low priority. So that kind of thing is not really there. Typically, what happens is there is a thread pool containing threads of same priority, and a thread is actually taken from that thread pool.
Maybe this threading model cannot utilize if there are multiple cores and multiple processors and all.
So in a multi-core machine, if you have a single thread, look, when does the multi-threaded model really gives us computational advantage? Just by spawning 10 threads, do we really get computational advantage? No. But if you have 10 cores, and if I create 10 threads, then all the threads are really executing parallelly. So we really have true parallel execution at that time, right? But here the problem is, so if I have a multi-threaded model, and if I have a multi-core machine, that is able to take advantage of all the cores. Whereas here in the single-threaded model, if I have a multi-core machine, only one core is going to be utilized. So to alleviate that problem, Node.js has a concept called clustering. So clustering allows us to spawn. Actually, what clustering does is actually creates multiple child processes, and all the processes actually cooperate to kind of execute the client requests. So there is no shared memory between these cluster members. So they are like independent processes. So with clustering, and there is a clustering API to simplify the whole clustering implementation. So it is actually pretty simple to implement. So unless if you want to have some shared memory between all the cluster members, it's not possible. So clustering allows us to utilize multi-core machines. So clustering simply means you are creating several child processes, and all the child processes. So when a request comes, an idle child, the request is routed to an idle child process. So there is no shared memory. So one advantage in the single computational thread model is how many of you have, I will give you an example. How many of you have programmed using servlets? Servlet. Okay. So if you have an instance variable, so if you have you don't need to really follow the details. For example, if you have an instance variable in a servlet. So servlet means it's a class. Servlet is like a Java framework for server-side processing. So in servlet, you create classes which are actually invoked, whose methods are invoked when request comes. So in a class, you can have instance variables. So if you have an instance variable in a servlet class, then the same instance actually is shared between multiple requests. So that can actually lead. So if you have an instance variable, that can actually lead to concurrency issues called race conditions, which can actually corrupt data. So if you have in a multi-threaded scenario, the biggest problem is that the entire memory space is shared between all the threads. So the possibility of subtle data corruption through race conditions, etc., is the probability is high if you don't program carefully, if you kind of use shared data structures. Whereas if you don't have any shared memory, then obviously the problem goes away. So that is one kind of advantage with single-threaded interleaved I/O processing. So this is kind of what I feel is when to use Node.js. It's really great for IO-centric applications. I think typically our web applications are IO-centric because the web applications spend a lot of time on database queries, file I/O, network I/O, or invocation of other web services, which is again kind of a network I/O. It is really great for real-time communication. So, for example, traditionally we used to use a mechanism called HTTP long polling for real-time communication. Means when something happens, I want to get the notification real time. I don't want to be polling the server every 5 seconds to, because polling a server every 5 seconds is going to be computationally expensive for the server, and it is also going to introduce delays in the client. So HTTP long polling. HTTP long polling is extremely simple to implement in Node.js because of the asynchronous I/O model. And WebSockets is actually is currently, have you heard of WebSockets? So WebSockets is actually a new standard for real-time two-way communication between client and browser and web server, or any kind of client and server. And it may not be great for compute-centric applications. For example, let's say you want to implement a high-end machine learning backend. So the learning algorithms are continuously executing. So in that case, probably you may want to go with a platform. For example, if you compare Node.js with V8, if you want to compare V8 with JVM. Now JVM is actually a great, is a highly performant platform because it has been evolving over last 15-20 years. So it is a very highly stable and the performance is pretty high. So if you want to go have a compute-centric application, probably it may be a good idea to go with something which gives better performance at the moment. I mean, V8 performance may also improve over time. Sorry, actually I get confused. Okay. So this is so whenever I've taken something, so code, etc., I've noted the source. So this kind of illustrates the event loop, the threading model of Node.js. So in any kind of event-driven, so you can think of this as an event-driven system. So any kind of event-driven system, there is an event loop, which continuously, checks whether there is an event and executes the event handler. So a similar kind of a system happens in Node.js. So there is a single event loop, that is a single main computational thread executed by the single computational thread. So whenever a request comes, the event loop is woken up and the request is processed. And whenever we initiate an I/O, then the I/O is passed on to a background thread called worker threads. So the main computational thread does not directly execute the input output. And when the result of the input output happens, that is passed again back to the event loop. So there is a single event loop. There is a single main thread. So this is a very simple, how many of you are not familiar with JavaScript syntax? Okay, so all of you have some comfort level, because actually I'm going to show some code and annotated code. But even if you don't follow the entire syntax, it is enough if you capture the idea. So, so at the top, I'm creating an HTTP object. So basically, require is kind of similar to C include. And then I'm creating an HTTP server. And the create server actually takes a function which takes two arguments, request and response. And I'm simply writing the response here. So I'm creating an HTTP server object here, HTTP module there. I'm just requiring the HTTP module there. Here I'm creating the server object, and here I'm calling server.listen. So here one important thing is that, for example, if you have programmed in PHP, we are used to having a separate web server take care of the HTTP part. But here there is no separate HTTP engine like Apache. So you actually code the HTTP engine into your application. That may sound kind of primitive and strange, but that is how it happens with Node.js. And it's actually, if you once you it's not really that hard. Actually, you just have to have a couple of lines of code. That's all. And so the command. So let us say this file is called app.js. So the command to execute this is node. So typically the node executable is called node. So the node and argument app.js. So it will execute the app. So now at this point, there are two options for us. One is I can show, I can actually kind of type hello world application interactively, or I can go through the slides and I can do that later. What do you want?
So I think let's go through the slides, and last we can have a demo.
At the end. Okay.
So initially the first thing is like that is most of the web developers who are here, they just want to see that is how actually we need to start with it.
Okay.
So how to step into Node.js, that is what are the prerequisites. For example, that is you mentioned that we do not want Apache.
Yeah, right.
So how to start coding Node.js?
Okay, so you need to install the Node.js runtime in your machine. So in Windows, I mean, it's pretty simple, because in Windows you can actually download the installer from Node.js website. You just install it. So the runtime, actually two important executables are there as part of the runtime. One is the Node, the application itself, which is actually used to execute your JavaScript code. Then there is a package manager called npm, Node Package Manager. So these are the two important executable files which are part of the. And if you are using Linux, then there are standard packages, Ubuntu, Debian packages for Node.js. So you can simply install them using the standard package manager. So once you install, you get this Node application installed in your system. And once you create a Node.js, so Node.js application is simply JavaScript. They are simply JavaScript files, right? So once you write the JavaScript code, you can execute the application using. You can take the command line terminal window, and you can simply type node and your application script file, and the application starts execute.
So how do we start configuring our server or something like that to accept requests for that?
There is nothing because of exactly that is actually, if you are, for example, if you are used to using PHP, then okay, you have to have configure the Apache, you have to configure this module. But here nothing, because the web server is part of your application. For example, here I have created the web server right here, and I am told the web server to start listening on port 3000. So there is no other configuration file required. Of course, you can take this 3000 from some config file which you yourself can read, but there is no system level configuration file required. So it is kind of a completely standalone and independent. I mean, the only two things you require is, once you install the Node.js runtime, you get the Node application installed, and you get the package manager installed. You don't really need to configure anything. And of course, when you start writing applications, your application will start typically relying on third-party modules. So that is when you require npm to allow you to easily install third-party modules. And so there is actually so typically an elementary Node.js application will have two files. One is your code. Second is a package description file called package.json. So that file is typically named package.json. So it is a JSON file which contains your application information and which third-party packages you are dependent on. So let us say, for example, I am using some package X. In the package.json, you can say, okay, dependencies package X. I will show you an example. So I will cover all this. So I just wanted to give a feel of the code. So here the two important, actually the main important thing actually I wanted to cover is only one thing. There is no separate HTTP engine like Apache required. So your web server is coded into your application. and you simply run the entire thing using Node and the main application file, script file.
We just need to copy and use this as.
Yes. If you copy paste it, it will work. Pointer uണ്ടോ ഇതുണ്ടല്ലോ. Okay. Yes. You can. I mean, there is some convention. So I'll show you the typical folder structure later on. But you don't need to. I mean, from a you can actually place it anywhere you want. So you typically what you do is you place it at the your application's root folder. Pardon me?
We will be installing Node.js.
Yes.
Then when we run that application, we will get a node tag. Node command prompt. In command prompt, we used to get node.
Okay.
Simply, if we give app.js, it will be running.
Yeah. So if you say node and command as command line argument app.js, it will run.
We don't want to give the folder structure like that.
No, nothing is required.
Nothing.
Because Node, actually what Node is, it is actually the execution engine for the JavaScript, Node.js code. So you give the main application file, script file, JavaScript file as a parameter to Node.js, the Node command, and it will run the application. Yeah, of course. You can use your, I mean, I actually use a typical standard text editor. Of course, you can use, there are some very good code editors for Node.js, like some commercial ones are also there, I think.
Sir, one question. In front-end JavaScript, if we write 100 lines of code, there is any error, let's say in the 70th line, to runtime we get exception.
Yes.
Does the Node.js during start of a server, does it do a pre-check that everything is good, or does it throw everything runtime?
Unfortunately, you will get errors at runtime because it's a dynamically typed language. So there is no. I think some level of checks are, syntax checking will be done at. I'm not. Because typically it is a dynamically typed language, so you won't really, if you have any kind of type errors, you will only get them at runtime. But I'm just wondering if you will get some kind of basic sanity checks at. So typically what happens is, so for example, let us say I run node app.js. So if there are like syntax errors, it will immediately report. But if there are, for example, in a if condition, I have some type error. So that will come up only when the if condition is executed. But syntax errors you will get when you run the application initially. Yeah, only at runtime, because there is no. That is the problem with dynamically typed languages, because there is no compilation. So here, what people say is, okay, you do unit testing. So the answer to that is, instead of relying on compiler, you do unit testing. But that can be a, so if you are used to a Java-like language, this can again seem more kind of what is it? Probably primitive. Okay. Sorry, actually again I'm okay. So here again I'm actually using. So we will go through some typical operations like basic file I/O, then database I/O, like a web application framework and directory structure and so on. So I will use some code snippet so that it doesn't sound very abstract to you. So here so Node.js, modules are kept in a separate file. So here I am requiring the module. So the module is actually loaded onto this variable. So I am using two modules, HTTP module and file system module. And here I am creating the HTTP server. So using create server. And the create server actually takes a function, so which takes two arguments. First is the request object, second is the response object. And then, so here basically what I'm doing is, so you don't need to follow the entire syntax, but just try to follow the idea. So here I'm reading the file. So I'm using, so fs is the file system module. So I'm saying fs.read file. Then I'm giving the file name. Then again here you can see the asynchronous nature of Node.js. So the file system, the file system read operation doesn't complete immediately. For example, here, if I try to fetch, look for the content of the file, I won't get anything here, because the file system read will be complete only when this only when this callback is executed. So what fs.read file does is, it will initiate the operation and register this callback, and this operation will run in some background thread, worker thread. And once the operation is completed, the worker thread will notify the main computational thread, the event loop, and then at an appropriate time, the event loop will call your callback function. And finally, so you are creating the HTTP server here, and you are giving the callback. So whenever an HTTP request comes, this callback function is executed. So what we are doing is read file. We are reading the file, and whatever file we are reading, we are actually sending it as a response. So that is response.end. End means this is the last thing in the response. So actually you can try to do this. From each slide you can try to capture the one idea. You can forget, if you want you can keep all the details, but these kind of details you can get from the internet. So try to capture. So here again, the kind of idea that we are emphasizing here is the asynchronous nature of. So if you are used to a synchronous model, we can actually make a lot of mistakes when programming in an asynchronous model. So the callback and the server.listen actually starts the server listening on port, whatever port we specify here. So here one problem is that we are reading the entire file here. So the entire file will be loaded onto an in-memory buffer. And then the entire, that buffer content is kind of sent as a response. So this will be inefficient for large files, obviously. And the client needs to wait till the entire file is read. So the client response, the experience is not that great. So here, so the streams comes to our rescue. Again, streams are actually a pretty big topic in Node.js. We will actually look at the main idea. So previously, what we had done is, we had actually we have a single read. Actually, I'm kind of okay. We have a single read file operation which reads the entire file content. Whereas here, what we are actually doing is we are actually creating a read stream, and the stream object is created. Then we are saying stream.on, so we are registering a callback here. So we are stream.on data. So that means whenever stream has data, call this function. And whenever the stream's data comes to an end, call this function. So we are registering two callbacks. So what the stream thing does is, it will read the file chunk by chunk. And whenever each chunk is read, this function, the data callback is called. So for each chunk. And finally, when all the chunks are finished, exhausted, the finalization callback is called. So instead of reading the data in a single shot, we are actually the streams will read it chunk by chunk. So we look at how to use streams for a more. So let us say, for example, you are serving a large image or a large audio file. So you would want to use streams rather than just reading the file and dumping it into the client, to the client.
So just a minute, one quick suggestion.
Yes.
So it would be better if that is, I right now understand that it would be better if we can go to a demo and then explain
exactly.
these things. That should be better because
it's all code.
Yes.
But the reason I am showing code is otherwise it will sound very abstract to you.
Yeah. So let's do a demo. So let's see that how exactly it comes, and then we can go to the slides.
So here, this is an empty application. I have 2 files. I told you, a basic Node.js application must have at least 2 files. Your code, obviously, and a package description file named package.json. JSON, I'm sure you all know about JSON, right? JSON format. JavaScript object notation. This is like a very simple data exchange format. So let us look at the package.json. So I have taken the liberty of typing it all in because some of the version numbers, etc., are important here. So this is actually a perfectly valid JSON text. So minimally you can give the name to your application. You can give a version. And the most important thing for all the applications is the list of dependencies. Zoom. List of dependencies. So here I am saying, my application is dependent on Node.js module named Express. Express is actually a server-side framework for Node.js. And I actually want to use the version 3.4.8 of Express. But if you don't, for example, I can put wildcards. For example, I can say 3.4 star. I don't care about, or I can say 3 star, or I can simply say star. So if I don't really care about the version. So you just give a comma, comma separated. So this is you can give a comma separated list of key value pairs of the dependencies. And so if you have used package managers like Maven, you already know the idea behind the package. So you list the dependencies, and then so now you need to install. So in order for your application to run, you need Express module, right? So all you need is to type npm. So this again is one of the tools installed by the Node.js installer, Node package manager. So npm. So you can simply say npm update. So it is doing some work. So you can see that it has actually installed the So let us go back and look. Zoom in. That's what. Let me see. Properties. Oh, font size. Okay, thanks. So here actually you can see that it has installed the Express module and all its dependencies. So it will automatically take care of the dependencies. And actually you can install the modules locally in your folder, or you can also install it globally. But typically it's a good idea to install it locally so that you don't really interfere with any other application. So here the great thing is, all you want to run your applications is packaged in a single directory structure. So it's a very, so as you can see, it has created a directory called modules, node underscore modules. Again, zoom I don't think I can zoom here. And it has a subdirectory express, and in that, and all the dependencies of express is again put here. So, but we won't really go into all those details. So npm has really taken care of all the dependencies. Imagine if we were to look up the jar files or modules ourselves and download and make sure the versions are right, dependencies are right. So now let us open. So we have the dependencies and the packaging done. So now let us try to write the application. Okay. Let me.
So if there is any questions, that is, please ask at this stage so that everyone will be aligned with what he is telling. So this is the initial stage where you have to ask questions. Questions you follow later. So whatever things you didn't get, just ask.
Okay. Now let me try to type it in front of you. Okay. First, we need to actually, because we are actually going to write a web application, we need a web server, right? So we need the HTTP module. And since we will actually use Express, because that actually simplifies the life for us. So we also need the Express module. Actually, one thing I like about Express is it is an extremely lightweight server-side framework. So in fact, personally, I like lightweight frameworks rather than complex. Actually, some time back, I remember, you may have heard about Hibernate persistence. It's a complex object relational mapping. And in the previous company I was working for, one developer was trying to write a query, and the query was pretty simple to write using plain SQL. But using Hibernate, actually, it was pretty impossible. It's been pretty complicated. So anyway, so I will. So I have included both the modules. Now I will create the server. Okay, first I have to create a. So I will create an instance of Express. Let me call it app. So I'm going to create an instance of Express. Actually, if you look at the previous example, I mean, if you have some remembrance of that, I had actually shown the snippet of code that you could create server. That actually took a function. So Express actually, so instead of the function, you can actually pass to the app. Hello?
Hello?
Oh, okay. So instead of passing a function, actually here I am passing the Express object. So now the Express will take care of request response handling. Now, so the minimum thing that a server-side framework, what is the basic thing that a server-side framework need to do? Pardon me? Yeah, a framework.
More of segregation of different components into like MVC kind of stuff.
Okay, so the MVC, right? So actually the Express does not really implement a model layer. So it actually is a view controller framework. So what is a controller? Controller is actually a function which gets executed in response to a user request on a particular URL, right? So basically, so we need a mapping from URLs to controllers. So that is called routing. So the routing is a basic thing. Routing means, from the client point of view, client sees URLs. Server sees, server as functions. So we need to kind of match URLs to functions or methods. So Express actually does that. So first we have to install the router. We will actually see more about this. Actually, we are actually installing what is called a middleware here. So we can say we are enabling the routing. With this line, we are actually enabling the routing. Then we can say, then now we can actually define routes. Routes means mappings between URLs to functions that needs to be executed, called controller functions. So for example, I can say app.get. So basically I'm mapping the URL endpoint /hello to the controller function, which I am giving inline here. So this is an anonymous function. And I don't really care about the request at this point. All I will say is response. So I will give you some response. If you want to be really academic about this, you can actually say response dot header. I think that is. So I am setting the content type in the header. If you want, this is not really required because I think the default content type is text bar HTML. Anyway, I will remove this because I don't want to add confusion. So all you need is just one line. Response.end means this is like the last. I am ending the response with this this content. Now we'll say HTTP dot HTTP dot listen, and I will give the port. Let's say 8080. Server dot listen. Sorry. So let me see if it works. If it works, I'll explain further. Otherwise, I'll fix the problem and explain. Node app. So the file is app.js. Okay, actually here, listen again. So once the server starts listening, you may want some indication. Let us say you want to log something. So you can actually again give, a callback function here. And I'm just going to say listening started. So you can see the listening started. So let me see if it actually works. So how will you check if it actually works? Yeah, we can open localhost colon 8080. So it says cannot get slash. What do you think is the problem? Yeah, actually we have installed only route for /hello. So we actually need to say.
Wow. So finally we saw it.
And just to complete, typically program you need some input also. So just to kind of, I don't want to stretch it too far. Actually, a request. So if you pass the request parameters, you can actually get it here. For example, I can say request dot params dot let us say name. So request has an object called params, and if you pass a name parameter, oh sorry, it's not coming up. Why?
Why?
Because we are not registered. I think it's just param. Param dot. Hello. Dot param. Anyway, as a backup, I have actually written this a few hours back. So let me just go back and check. Anyway, actually that doesn't have the param. I think it's precursor params. Let me just try once more. This define param dot name. I don't know what it's called.
So Praveen, help to debug.
Okay. Okay. So let me just do console.log. So let me dump the request object.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. So I'm going to dump the request object and let's see. Console.log JSON.string. Actually, it's request.query, not params. Anyway, let me try to dump the request object so that you can actually it's request.query. But let me just try to why the let me circular structure to maybe the JSON.stringify is not required. Okay. So here actually you can see the request object dumped. So there is something good comes out of. yeah. So you can actually see the entire, it's a big, JavaScript object. Headers. So you can actually see all the headers here. So you can actually, so if you want to access a header, all you need to say request dot headers dot host connection access, all this, everything, the URL. So all the parameters are there. Okay. So let us go back.
So let's go back to the demo session. So I have some questions.
Okay.
So no questions?
Yeah. Do you have any questions?
So for us, that is for web developers who is simply experienced in PHP and JavaScript.
Yes.
So to start with that, they have to install it in the server.
Yes.
Okay, and then this app.js
and package.json.
JSON. Those are the two files we need to work on.
Yes.
And package.json, we have to update all the packages that are dependencies. Which are the dependencies there?
Yes.
And in app.js, we have to, this app.js file is something that we are creating by ourselves to start working on a Node.js, to create a Node.js application. Then all these lines we have to write. There is no support from the Node.js guys. Like some libraries that we have to include or something like that. Because for starting working on it, HTTP is going to require HTTP Express.
But it's a few lines that we, it's a repetitive few lines.
Stuff. A few lines we have to use.
Yeah.
And then.
So for example, yeah.
So if you have 5 files, that is app.get/hello, app.get another name. So based on that, the URL structure, it will route to different pages.
So typically, you would not keep all these controller functions in your main application JS.
Okay.
So you would actually write this in a separate modules, and you will require those modules here just like any other. So you will your application will have a module structure of its own.
Okay.
So, any other questions? Oh, you mean? Okay. Here actually, you just install the roots. That's all. I mean, you have to program it yourself. So by probably installing the roots, and then, for example, let's say you want to have name-based virtual host. There could be some packages which does it. I haven't used it myself, but it's pretty easy to do it yourself, because as you see, so here for example, by using the HTTP request in the header name. Headers.name, you can actually get the name of the domain name in the request, and you can actually use that to set up the routes. But there could be some frameworks, not frameworks, some libraries which make it easy. I mean, because Node.js has like huge library support. And you can have any number. You can actually. Yeah, you can run in any port. You can actually have multiple servers listening. So you can have one server listening on 80, another server listening on it. So actually, that is one way to create context. Because if you actually want to have this different context listening on different ports, it is very simple, because all you need to have is create multiple server instances and have them listen on different ports.
Dr. J here. One question. So if I compare PHP and Node.js, so PHP on my web context root itself, I have, let's say, 1.php, 2.php. Yes. I can directly access them. Yes. Even if I have static files, I can directly access them. Yes. In Node, I see this is an entry point, right? Yes. Even for static request, yes, do I have to still load all the HTTP Express modules only for serving static content?
Yeah, so very good question. Actually, for serving static, there is actually we will come to that. So there is a middleware which takes care of that. So all you need to is install that. Just like here, I have enabled routes here, right? I have enabled routing here. So similarly, I can enable static file serving. So I just need to give the name of the directory from where the static files need to be served. Actually, so these are actually, we will come to that. This is actually called Express middlewares. So what we install here. So what we so whenever we use like app.use function, we are actually installing a middleware. So Express has like a huge number of not huge, like good number of middlewares which we can use. So one of them is like to serve static files. Any other questions?
So I think everybody is able to step into Node.js right now, and let's explore.
Okay. Okay, coming back. So now you must be comfortable with this. So we are so here of course I am creating and I am not using Express here, but we can do the same thing with Express also. So I'm using create server and I'm passing a raw handler function there. So here what I'm doing is I'm creating a stream, read stream from a file, and actually I'm simply saying stream.pipe. So if you have used Unix pipes, output of a command is piped to as input of another command, right? So the similar concept here. So output of the stream is fed to this stream. So it's piped to the stream. So so it's very simple to create. So when you want to actually process large amounts of data, streams are very important, because the streams, otherwise you have to actually read the entire file and buffer the entire file in the memory, or you have to write some logic of your own. Here stream, what they do is it reads data chunk by chunk and lets you process the data chunk by chunk. So I think for probably some kind of big data processing, streams can be used. So file input stream is piped to the rest. So the input stream is piped to an output stream. And if you really care about the HTTP, you know how it. So in this particular case, in HTTP has a transfer mode called chunk transfer encoding. So that means file is actually sent chunk by chunk to the client, browser client. So in this particular case, chunk transfer encoding will be employed. So streams are like, is a very important area in Node.js. If you really want to write optimized or performant applications. So we have already covered this. So package management is done via this utility called npm. Provides simple and powerful package management and reads module dependencies from package.json. So typical usage is either npm install or npm update. Can install our dependent modules locally or globally. So again, we have actually seen this, so we don't need to really. And here one actually you can use npm to also publish your. Let us say you are writing a module and you want to publish it. You can use npm to publish to public repository. But accidentally you don't want to end up publishing your enterprise application. So you can actually mark your repository as private, which means accidentally you won't end up publishing it. Even npm will refuse to publish it if it's marked private. And with Node.js you can also have a secure web server. So instead of HTTP, you just need to use HTTPS module. So require HTTPS, and we won't really go into the details of how HTTPS is works, but it typically at the server side configuration for HTTPS will require a key, a private key, as well as a certificate. So these two files you will need to configure, and then you follow the similar. So instead of http.create server, https.create. So wherever you use HTTP, you use HTTPS. That's all. It's very simple. So now you want to, when you write web applications, you want to have a kind of modular framework, some framework which allows you to write the web applications. So in the Node.js world, the raw basic web application that you want to write, you can write a response handler directly, code a response handler directly for the HTTP module. That is like the raw. Then one step above that, there is a framework called Connect. So what the Connect does is, Connect actually installs a dispatcher. A function, dispatcher means a function which kind of invokes other functions. So dispatcher as the HTTPS callback function modules. Then the dispatcher will actually, so you can install what are known as Connect middlewares. So middlewares are actually functions which are called by Connect in response to requests. And middlewares can be chained. So initially the first middleware to be called is obviously the dispatcher itself. And then so middlewares are actually chained, and a middleware can choose to continue the chain or stop at that point by calling either next or not calling next. So if a middleware calls next function, then the next middleware in the chain will be executed. Otherwise, the execution is middleware execution is terminated at this point. So for example, here, so let us say I want to, so this is like a sample middleware chain. I have a logger which logs the requests. So typically you want to have an access log. Then I have a body parser. So if your requests are going to come as JSON, so you want to parse the JSON object, and you want to be able to access them as JavaScript objects. I mean, you want to be able to validate and parse the incoming JSON object and be available as JavaScript object accessible from your application. So whatever is parsed by the body is actually available as request.body object. So you can simply access the request.body object. Then like static. So this is the middleware that we were talking about. So static middleware takes care of serving static files. So for example, what the static middleware would do is, it will see if the request is actually for a static file, if the URL is for a static file. If it is for a static file, it will serve the static file and it will not call the next. That means otherwise it will call the next, so that the custom middleware execution continues. So this is the idea behind connect middlewares. So the connect module is actually named connect itself. You can actually install it by if you want to install a particular module by name, you can simply say npm install that module name. So you can say npm install connect. This will also I think it will update the package.json automatically. So connect usage, actually connect and express are closely related. So express can be thought of as an extension to connect. So connect, and we can install middlewares by saying, so instead of express we say connect, and app.use middleware. So middleware is actually a function which takes request, response, and a next function. And if this middleware calls the next, so here actually I am installing two middlewares, and when a request comes, the connect will dispatcher will invoke this middleware, and if this middleware invokes the next function, it will invoke the next middleware in the chain. If not, it will not invoke the next middleware in the chain. So it gives us some kind of a easy kind of plugin modularity in a plugin framework rather. So it kind of creates a middleware stack or a chain. So we have already seen that. And connect also provides some elementary routing. So you can actually install a middleware at a particular URL. That means that middleware will only be invoked if the URL pattern matches. And you can also install, typically, for example, at the end of the chain, you can have a error handler middleware, for example. So basic routing. So these are some connect middlewares which are already available. Cookie parser, for example, parses the cookie object and makes it available as request.cookies object or request.signed cookies. Actually, Express or Connect has support for signed cookies. The advantage of signed cookie is that it cannot be spoofed. So signed cookie is actually something which is encrypted using a signing key. So advantage is that somebody cannot try to spoof the cookie. So I cannot try to, let us say I kind of randomly try to create some valid cookies. I won't be able to because I don't know your secret key. So it is more secure. Body parser limits the body sizes. Query request.query for subsequent logger. So these are some. I mean, there is a whole lot more. I'm just giving you a few examples. So if you want to serve a static file, all you need to say is app.use. So when we say app.use, we are actually installing a middleware. So all we need to say is connect.static. So we just need to install static middleware, and all we need to give it is the path to your public folder where all your JavaScript, like client-side JavaScript files and HTML and CSS files and everything is residing. So Express is actually built on the top of Connect. So Express provides some other additional functionality. So Express routing is a bit more featured. For example, in Express, we can actually specify the HTTP method. So for example, I can say app.get means when a GET request comes on this URL, invoke this controller. Or I can also say app.post or app.head, or I can say app.all also. That means for any request, invoke that. So I can specify the URL endpoint, and we have already seen this. So it's again, one thing I like about Express is it's extremely lightweight. So if you have some custom requirements, it's very easy to bend the Express to suit your requirements. Whereas with heavyweight frameworks, it is actually easy to write typical web applications. But if you want to do something off the mark, it becomes very, very difficult. So Express is extremely easy. So this is actually typically how the directory layout of an Express application should look like. Actually, this layout can be automatically generated there's actually a tool called Express. So if you run Express -e, it'll actually you can bootstrap an Express application using this. I mean, you cannot compare this with Cake or Rails boots, because that is like much more fully featured. This is like a very minimal. It'll generate an application skeleton. That's all. So typically, your main file is called app.js. Then your package.json. Then all your static files are put in a public folder, and your controllers are typically put in a folder called routes. And your controller code will be put here, and you will require it in your app.js and use it from there. And like I mentioned previously, Express is actually a view controller framework. So it actually supports the notion of views. So there are different templating languages supported. The one which I have used is one called EJS. So you can put your views here, and you can refer to your views from the controller. Controller can pass data to the views. So all the typical stuff you can do. So this is like a typical Express application. So how do you? We talked about the controller part and how to route URL requests to controllers. Now you also need views, right? So how do you render views with Express? So first you have to configure the Express with the views folder where all the views files are residing. So you do that by setting the configuration option views, and you can specify the views folder. So dir name is actually a global variable in Node.js, which is actually the home directory of your app.js. So you basically configure the views folder. You can also configure the view engine. View engine means the templating engine. So here I have configured the view engine as EJS. There are a few other view engines also supported. So you configure the views folder from where the views have to be fetched. The view files are residing. Configure the view engine. And this is actually a controller. Don't worry about this. We won't really. So basically, if you write your controllers as separate modules, you need to export the functions out. So that is why I'm giving exports dot. So so here I'm saying response. So instead of response.end. So I am saying response.render, rest.render. I am giving the view name index. So this means, and then I am giving the data that the view may refer to. So the data object or the model. So response.render, view name, and the data. So what the what Express will do is, Express will look at the views folder, look up the views folder, and it look up the view engine, and then it will fetch the template file from the view folder, and then invoke the view engine with the template file with this data. So this is how you connect controllers to views in Express, and we will also briefly look at how to. So here actually I am passing some data to the view, and I want to be able to refer to this data from the view. So that is also pretty simple. Anyway, first actually so here actually when I say response.render and view name, so how does a view lookup happen? So I have configured the view folder here, but a little bit more. For example, let us say I say a response.render layout, and let us say this is the views folder. Then this layout.ejs will be taken. And now let us say I say response.render photos, and I have a photo subfolder, and there is an index.ejs. Then the index.ejs will be taken. So index.ejs is like the default, view of that. And I can refer to sub like I can say photo/upload. So just to give you a feel of, and I can refer to the data passed from the controller. Sorry. So I can refer to the data passed from the controller by, this is like the special tag. I mean, I don't need to explain to you because I'm sure you work with a number of templating languages. So this means actually I'm referring to the title variable of the data object passed to by the controller. And then it has like for each and all the typical templating. So it's a templating language, and it can refer to the data passed to the controller. That's all. So this is a EJS. So we'll come to database connectivity. Any questions so far? Because I'm sure the concepts are nothing new to you, because this is something which is available in all the frameworks. But yes. Yes.
We call it next.
Yes.
Where did it stop? Actually, it told that it will stop when we require the particular middleware. For example, if you are rendering a static file, it will stop the chain on static. But we called next in the method. But I didn't really understand how it changed, or whether it called all in that chain, or
no,
where did it stop?
Yeah, the middleware code must contain the logic to do that. So for example, the static middleware. So if, let us say I am coding the static middleware. What I will do is, I will look up the request URL, and I will see if it is actually referring to a static file. And if it is referring to a static file, I will serve the static file, and then I won't call next. But if not, I will call next, so that it is referring to some other custom controller that is installed at a URL. So it should go ahead and call the controller. Okay. So database connectivity, again the big difference here is the asynchronous part. Otherwise, connecting to MySQL, etc., I'm sure all of us have done. So that is where people can, because I have seen, because I work with some students who, and I've given some Node.js projects, and main kind of difficulty there is kind of getting used to the asynchronous mindset. There are actually some libraries which helps us make it easy, and we can write our own. Actually, I did write something of my own once. So, so here, For example, for MySQL connectivity, there is a Node MySQL package, Node-MySQL package. So you can install that package by saying npm install MySQL. And once you install it, you can actually require the package. So you can require the module. So your module object is available here. Then I can say MySQL.create connection, and I can give the connection parameters. So you get a connection object. Of course, in a typical application, you won't do like this. You would actually use a connection pool. So then there are connection pool modules also available, which you can use. Why do we have to use a connection pool? Why? What is the problem with this? Pardon me? Yeah. First of all, because creating connection has some latency involved, because TCP connection has to be established and authentication has to be done. So for every connection, if you do that, there is a latency. Then you want to be able to control, your database can only handle so many concurrent connections. So you don't want to have your database handling, let us say, some 10,000 connections. So you want to be able to limit the number of connections to your database. So if you use a connection pool, you can say, okay, this connection pool has, maximum limit of this pool is, let us say, 500 connections. That means only 500 concurrent connections are going to be made to your database. So you can control, and the rest of the things will be queued. The pool, request, if connection is not available in the pool, the request has to be queued till a connection becomes available. So connection pooling will be usually done. Then connection.connect will actually connect. And here is a query. So here I can give the query string. And here it's a asynchronous query. So I won't get a response immediately. So after the next statement, if I try to do something, we have to understand this query is not yet completed. So connection.query will immediately, will register the query, register the callback, start the query, register the callback, and immediately complete. So whatever you want to do at the end of the query, you have to do in the callback function. So callback, you will get error object, the rows, which is an array of objects, and the fields, that you are querying. And if you have an error, you can look at the error. Otherwise, it will be null if there is no error. And you can actually go through the rows and process the rows. Finally, you can say connection.end. So, for example, if I say connection.connect, connection.query, and here if I say connection.end, what will happen is before the query is completed, you will be terminating the connection. So, query is completed only when this callback is invoked. So, then the problem is, let's say I want to do second query is dependent on the first query, and third query is dependent on second query. Then I will have what is called a callback hell. Because I'm going to have a callback inside a callback inside a call. So, but there are some like libraries which allows us to linearize the code, and it's not very difficult to write it off on our own also. So database connectivity. Any questions? Database. And the Node.js contains packages for virtually any database. So MongoDB, Redis, whatever you can think of, Node.js has the package available. In fact, MySQL itself, it has like several options you can choose from. And when you write a web application, you install the basic routing, you have a basic framework going, you can serve the static files, you can do the database query, you have the views. Now you want to be able to authenticate, right? You want to be able to log in the user, and nowadays, people are not not satisfied with. Previously, each site used to keep their own login ID password. Now people say, okay, I want to be able to log into your site with Google or Facebook login. So there are standards like OpenID, OAuth, etc., which allows us to do it. So there is actually a beautiful module called passport.js. So if you are writing Node.js application, use passport.js for authentication. So passport.js actually, so you can install that using npm install passport. So it's an authentication middleware. So it is actually a connect middleware. for Node.js, and it has 140 plus authentication strategies. That means you think of authenticating with any authentication provider. Passport.js has the answer, and you can implement your own authentication also. Supports OpenID OAuth. So Passport.js is a site, and you may want to store the session data in a in a cache like Memcache or Redis. So you can actually session data can be serialized in the store like Redis. So all that provision is there in Passport.js. So authentication. These are some additional reading material. Node.js actually is a pretty good, nicely written book. I think its PDF is available. So I'm not really sure whether it is legally available or illegally available.
Okay, so considering the Node.js, that is when we think about Node.js, basically, that is, it is just like learning a new programming language like PHP or anything like that. We have to learn its syntax, its keywords, and structure.
Yes.
And that is the reason why the JavaScript programmers are not able to step into it immediately, because it is just like learning a new programming language.
Which one? And Node.js.
Node.js.
Okay.
And that is we have to learn it and start using it.
Okay.
And also starting it, also it is not easy as other server-side language, because we have to do all the basic basic structure by ourselves before even starting coding a single line. Right.
I actually. Because the kind of plumbing, the plumbing code that you need to write is very less. It's not that much.
Yeah, that is something. Even if we can get the same code from him and we can start using it, because I just want to see how people can start using Node.js, and if somebody want to start using, they can download and use it from there, right? Okay. So the way of thinking has to change. Or
actually, if you are a front-end developer, you already know about code because you are already using callbacks all the time, right? You are already used to asynchronous programming. Only thing is that you are not connecting to database or you are not reading from file, but you are responding to mouse clicks. You are responding to Ajax calls. So you are already, it is already a single-threaded event loop model implemented in browser. So the same thing implemented in a server. So the basic model is same. Only thing is that instead of mouse click events being mouse clicks and Ajax calls, you have events which are database query completions or file reads or network I/O. So for a front-end programmer, I think it's a golden opportunity for you. I mean, I'm not paid by Node.js people, but I'm just saying. But it's a golden opportunity to get into back-end server-side programming, and it's a very popular language. I mean, popular platform, and there is great community support. And actually, personally, I have written a couple of major applications using Node.js, and it's fun to work with. I mean, it's not language-wise; it's JavaScript, and JavaScript again, as a front-end developer, JavaScript has some differences between, like, if you are used to Java, for example, versus JavaScript, there are some differences, right? It's a dynamically typed language. Functions are first-class objects. Java programmers may not be, aware of the, of course now Lambda expressions are coming to Java. But so all these many ideas from front end actually are carried over to the back end also. Only thing is that maybe package management, okay, that is but that is made simplified by NPM. So actually, I'm kind of trying to figure out what is new.
Okay.
Maybe nothing much. Pardon me? Yeah, of course, the library. I mean, conceptually, there is pretty much. If you kind of conceptually try to understand the front end JavaScript environment versus the Node.js, it's the same computational model. Only thing is that the events you are responding to are different.
Okay. So I really want you to use this opportunity to ask questions and clarify.
Hi. So we can write custom modules in Node.js, right?
Yes, yes.
So when we use that recur, that parameter parenthesis thing,
Yes.
how do we define that names? Like in AngularJS, there's angular.module name. We can give like that. How it is in
So when we write our own module, how to define our module name? So we define it in the package.json.
Okay.
So we define the package module name in the package.json. Our module name in package.json.
Okay.
I have not written modules myself, so I don't know. But basically, you can basically your module name you can give in package.json. That's what it is.
So any question?
Instead of Express, we can use AngularJS to write the service.
No, Angular is a client-side MVC framework. Express is server-side.
Okay.
So if you are using Angular, then still you can use Express at the server side. Only thing is that you won't really need views.
Okay.
Because you will be serving JSON, right? So you can still use Express for routing, etc. But you won't really need views. You can.
Then we have provided app.js. Whether we can give different names.
Yeah, different name. It's just a convention.
Then if we want to install other modules, means Express DB.
Yes.
Everything should be configured in package.json.
Yes. So either you can manually, let us say you want a particular, you can actually manually edit package.json, or you can say npm install the name. That will also update the package.json. So.
Then we are connecting to database. Then we will be getting a result.
Yes.
And if I want to give the result as an JSON data, whether I want to format anything.
No, you just need to construct programmatically generate the JSON.
Response.data, it will be enough.
Or actually, I mean, from JavaScript, it's pretty simple because you have a JSON object. You can actually, so in the case of Express, actually, you can simply write a JSON object. I mean, JavaScript object. It will automatically convert to JSON. Only thing is that the content type, the response content type, you have to specify as
JSON.
application/JSON.
Okay. Means in code you have specified that string, not JSON.stringify. Somewhere you use.
That is not required. That is not required because the Express middleware will take care of it.
Any particular hosting provider which you recommend?
Yes. Actually, my own applications are actually hosted in AWS. Yeah. Okay. So, but there is.
Actually, I have heard about Nodester.
Yeah, Nodester. So there are some PaaS focused on Node. I think Nodester is one. There is something else. Node. Some Node. There is another PaaS provider focused. But Heroku, all this actually support Node. Node.js. So you can actually. But if you really want to roll it on your own, you can use AWS.
So no more questions.
Actually, one more point I had. Actually, one important point. This is like a practical side of if you actually want to deploy Node.js application. So here, so actually, we had like http.listen, so server.listen 8080 etc. Right? So now let's say I want to listen. I want my server to be running on port 80. Typically, if you have a simple website, you want your server to be running on port 80. But now, what is the problem there? What do you think will be the problem? So if I say not, so let us say let me just go back to the. Okay, here. So here I'm saying app.listen 3000, right? Or HTTP server, or I can go to the previous. So here, let us say, I have .listen 3000. Now I want to listen on port 80. And in a server, public server, what do you think will be the problem? Any issues? Or I can just say listen 80 node app.js. That's it. No, let us say you have server, you have your own virtual machine. I mean, this is not a programming issue. It's actually an OS issue. I think the whole talk was about that. Did you just come in, or I mean the whole talk was how JavaScript is used in the server side. Anyway, so you understood the question, right? So I say listen 80.
Is this sorry? Is this question specific to Node or any servers?
Anything.
Any servers, right? Because.
But actually, in some other, like if you are using Apache, etc., Apache takes care of this issue. So, but in Node by itself doesn't take care of the issue. No. Actually, the problem is that port 80 is what is called a privileged port, a reserved port. Ports 1 to 1024 are reserved ports. So in Linux, for example, typically any kind of Unix operating system, if you want to bind to a reserved port, you need higher privileges. Traditionally, you used to require root privileges. So if you are a normal user, you will not be able to. So now, okay, so you run it as root. Then what is the problem? There is no control. Means you can stop because you have root access. You can stop the server. Who said that? Security. Okay. Yeah, it's a secure. Because actually, let us say there is some vulnerability with your server. Then the remote user will be execute code or do actions in your server with root privileges, and you don't want to do that. So you never want your web server to be running with root privilege. So how does Apache and all these people have been doing it all the time? What they do is they bind to, so initially they start with root privilege, bind to port 80, then they drop the privilege. And so your application actually, when your PHP executes, it's no longer running with root privilege. So here, unfortunately, Node.js doesn't have anything like that. So in Linux, actually, Linux has this thing called capabilities. So you can actually configure, if you know the system administration well, you can actually do it without root privilege. But there is actually a utility called priv bind. So if you want to run Node.js on port 80, use the privilege bind. So priv bind utility allows your applications to, your non-privileged applications to bind to port 80. So if you want to, you can also go the long way and use Linux capabilities and all that, but you can simply use priv bind. So because I was also wondering the same thing, then I looked up and I came up with the priv bind. So I thought I should share with you. Okay, any questions?
Again, question?
Yeah.
Sorry, whether there will be any cross-browser issues?
Yeah, Raja will be covering it. Right?
Okay.
There is a quick session on the security aspects of Node.js, and Raja will cover that topic in next 10 to 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you for your time.
So when we do deploy in AWS or any deployment, yes, we will always go for a default port, right? Unless we are behind some IIS server. Okay. But that will be our default port, right? Port 80. So Node has to inherently fix this security problem. It should not be leveraged to developer, hey, there is some setting missing. Because if Hello World itself is unsecure, How can we make a better world?
Well, probably because it's an OS issue really. That is probably why Node.js is not really, because the way you do it in different operating systems are different. So that's why probably Node.js really doesn't take care of that. But like I said, it's not very hard to do if you know the right tools. Like if you use Prebind. But that is one, because Node.js you are actually writing your own web server. So that is why Node.js is not really, because Node.js is really a virtual machine plus some libraries.